Welcome to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today for a Saturday bulletin, this is an extra with Colin Watt, who's already laughing. Colin, how are you doing? Welcome back to the show.
I'm doing good. It's an interesting one to be here on a Saturday afternoon. I think I'll need to put some overtime budget and send it over to you. That's three days this week.
I think the overtime budget's been reached and breached this season, to be fair, the amount of bulletins we've had to do. But yes, I just looked at this weekend with no fixtures and thought it would still be good to have a bulletin. Let's have a general kind of overview of where Celtic are. We've spoken a lot, Colin, about the coaching setup, the whole structure of the football department, whether or not there's going to be a director of football, and who is going to be the manager of this side. We'll talk about that near the end of the actual bulletin, which will last about 45 minutes this morning, Colin, as well. But really, it's to try and show the magnitude of this rebuild that whoever's going to be in charge of Celtic is going to have to face. And let's have a look right through the squad and what quality do we still have? What are we going to be left with? Who are we going to retain in terms of loan deals? Are we going to bring any of our loanees back to the club? And we'll go position by position to see where we're going to be at the end of this. Let's start off with the goalkeepers. Now, when I look at the goalkeeper situation, I think back to maybe August last year when you and I did a lockdown podcast. It was the first lockdown, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. And we were talking about the future of Craig Gordon at the club. And you said, at that time, I've got to say now, you were right. Keep Craig Gordon at Celtic, offer him a coach's position, and whatever happens after this, even if we manage to get in Fraser Forster at that time, Gordon's experience would be pivotal for Celtic going for the 10th league title in a row. Yep. We know it didn't happen. Was the failure to capture Forster the beginning of the end for Neil Lennon, the fact that he wasn't getting his first choice players in, do you think, Colin?
I think what the kind of main issue was we're going with something that was untested this year, and you can see now that we went back to Scott Bain. It's a case of tried and tested with him. Fraser Forster, you knew what you were going to get off him. Craig Gordon, you knew what you were going to get off him. And bringing Barkas in, as we say, there's been a lot of players, not just at Celtic, but across all the leagues in Europe, that have moved to a new team during this pandemic, haven't been able to settle into their teams, and you've not seen the best of them. Take a look at Chelsea are playing just now. Timo Werner, a fantastic striker, but he's just never been able to settle into that Chelsea side. And you can name countless other players across Europe who are in that same scenario. So, I think we needed something that was tried and tested that we could rely upon this season. And for us, Barkas just hasn't been that.
Well, of course, as you mentioned there, we bring in Barkas, who apparently was the second choice. We had scouted him for a number of years, by all accounts. He came with a fairly high pedigree, international for Greece. We had faced Barkas in Europe when he played with AEK Athens. But as you say, it's simply not worked. I think there's been a whole range of reasons. And one of the big reasons that we spoke about previously on the podcast, Colin, was the fact that Barkas and Ajeti didn't have the normal introduction to Celtic. But it's the same for any player, obviously, moving cross-country, if you like. It's the same for any player. They're going to move into an environment where they don't have the same off-the-field kind of camaraderie that they might have, whereby they're integrating not only with their teammates, but into the society that they've moved into. They've not been able to integrate into Glasgow. We know that Ajeti has been, until recently, certainly staying in a hotel. So it's been very difficult for the new players coming in. So with all that, taking all that into consideration, Colin, does Barkas, this is one of the bigger questions really, does the £5 million, which is a record fee for a Celtic goalkeeper coming into the club, does he have a future? Because I posed the question during the week there, Colin, why don't we play players like Barkas and Ajeti between now and the end of the season for the remaining league games and any Scottish Cup games that we participate in? And let's have a right good look at them and see if we are able to salvage anything from the £10 million investment.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think I mentioned it when I was on the bulletin on Wednesday, that I wouldn't be surprised to see Barkas start against Rangers in the next game. I think Kennedy's now looking to players that are going to be there next season to see what you can get out of them. And as we go through the four goalkeepers that we do have, for me, I think this will be Bain's last season in the Celtic jersey.
Right. Do you think he's been kind of unlucky as a Celtic goalkeeper? He's come in a real difficult period this season. I mean, we know that he played under Rodgers and he played under Lenny. He's now playing under Kennedy. His Celtic career's been a bit stop-start, hasn't it? I mean, I think he's a good shot stopper if I'm looking at his attributes, Colin, but I don't think he commands his area. And like all the goalkeepers we have, I think that he's one of these guys that if you're 1-1 up, if you're in a game and it's 1-1, and he's been pounded at the back, I wouldn't be 100% confident that Bain would be strong enough, not only from his goalkeeping position, but obviously to rally the defence as well. It's been difficult for all the goalkeepers. You don't think Scott Bain has a future at Celtic?
No, I don't think so. I mean, you've got to remember this is a guy that was brought in as a loan signing for the third choice. He was the third choice goalkeeper who eventually, through a number of reasons, was brought in to be the Celtic number one. But there was absolutely no way that he was brought in to ever be a full-time Celtic number one. He was brought in as a stopgap. And now we find in the position that that's where he is. He is the number one just now. Again, if you're looking to strengthen the team, then that means that Bain isn't going to be the first choice. You want him to go back to being the third choice. So you want Barkas to be at least second choice if you're going to bring another goalkeeper in. You want him ideally to be the first choice because you've spent that amount of money on him. But if you're going to maybe try and bring someone else in, the two of them should be fighting for the jersey. And that would make Bain the third choice goalkeeper. Now, you've just offered a new contract to Connor Hazard as well. I don't think we'll be going with 4 goalkeepers. And for that reason, Bain will want to continue to play football. He's been playing regular football now at Celtic for the last 18 months or so. I think his time will move on and he will probably move on to another club this summer.
Right, so yeah, good point around Connor Hazard. And of course, we posed that question to John Kennedy last week, was it? In the press conference that we were lucky enough to be invited to. And he spoke about Hazard and the fact that he does rate him highly, but there are aspects of his game that he needs to improve on. And a big part of that was the mentality as well, wasn't it? To be able to not switch off if you've made a mistake. I think Connor Hazard next season will be the number 3. I think the question around Barkas is the big one for me, Colin. The club will look at that investment, 5 million, and if they decide to bring in a new goalkeeper, and I think that will be on the shopping list, then I think part of that will be that they will try and recoup some of the fee for Barkas. I mean, his stock's still going to be high in Greece. One poor season in Scotland, I don't think it's going to affect his stock over in his homeland. We probably won't get 5 million quid back for him due to the fact that money's tight in football all across the globe. But if you were able to get 2.5, 3, and I know that's a big loss, but if you were able to get 2.5 or 3 for Barkas, invest that in the new manager's first choice, don't you think that would be a better move?
I don't know. I'm taking a look at it here. Now, obviously, we knew we were coming on here to discuss this, so I've took a look at the players' ages when their contracts are going to expire. And if you take a look at Barkas will be 27 at the end of this season. With a contract expiry of 2024. So obviously it's a long-term deal he's tied down to at Celtic. Bain will be 29 at the end of this season, which is arguably when a goalkeeper starts to come into their prime. We've seen goalkeepers play on till they're 35, 36 and still be at the top of their game. He'll be wanting to play a lot of football, and I don't think Celtic will be able to guarantee Scott Bain that football because he was never brought in to be the number one. You've heard that throughout the season from John Kennedy, from Neil Lennon, that Barkas was brought in to be the number 1 goalkeeper. Now, that's a big kind of slap in the face to your recruitment if you end up selling Barkas after a season. For me, the only reason Barkas would leave this summer is if he decides he wants to go. I think Celtic will do everything they can to give him at least the pre-season coming up, and then make their decision. I think if a new goalkeeper comes, when the new manager comes in, and they looks to bring in a new goalkeeper, I think Scott Bain will be the one that loses out, just because of, one, it probably is his age at the club. You're looking at Hazard's only 23. He'll be the number 3 choice. You don't want to be a number 3 if you're 29 years old. And also the investment that we spent on Barkas in the first place. Someone will try and get that back. Well,
I think that's going to be an interesting one, Colin. It really will be an interesting position because at 29 for a goalkeeper, that's not really that old. I mean, he's almost got 10 years on Craig Gordon, who we've just spoken about as well. I don't think Bain ever signed for Celtic as a number 1, so if he's still number 2 next season, I don't think that would be a huge surprise to him, even though he's had some experience this season. But we'll wait and see about Barkas. I think of the two big money signings, if you were to ask me, and we'll get to the strikers, between Barkas and Ajeti, which one I would keep, I would actually go for Ajeti, and I'll explain that later on. If I get a good enough offer, I'll be taking it for Barkas, if I was the new guy in charge. Either way, whatever the permutation is going to be, I think out of the three, the one that's guaranteed to be here is actually Connor Hazard. And the new manager will be looking for a new goalkeeper. So there is a question mark around Barkas and Bain at the moment, I think, from the three mentioned. Now, I've split the defence up into specific positions. It's not always easy, because I know we do have a lot of players who can, for example, Ayer, you could say, is a backup right back, even though he is now, I think, other than Kevin Graham, most people see him as a centre half. So right backs at the moment, what we've got is Tony Ralston, John Joe Kenny, and I'm going to throw in Leo Connor as well, because I want to look at the entire squad. I know he's out on loan. He can play central defence or right back. International cap for Ireland already. He's been out on loan to Tranmere Rovers. We've got John Joe Kenny in from Everton. I wouldn't call it an emergency loan deal, but we were down to one right back, with Chris Ayer obviously being covered, and that one right back was Anthony Ralston. Ralston, at his age, Colin, hasn't had enough first team football, certainly for Celtic. Even when he comes in and plays reasonably well, I don't think he's ever going to get the buy-in from the majority of the Celtic fans. He isn't the future. He's not even, I don't think, the backup next season. And the reason I say that is for the betterment of his own career. He can't be sitting at Celtic, Colin, and getting 4 or 5 games a season. I know he's had a couple of loan deals out at St Johnstone and Dundee United. I think we just cut our losses on Anthony Ralston. I'm pretty sure he'll get a club elsewhere, rather than setting up another season-long loan deal, Colin. But then that really leaves us with Leo Connor as our only right back, because I can't see us keeping Kenny either. I mean, that's a very short-term deal, John Joe Kenny. What's your thoughts on the right back, the three that we have? How many more do we need to bring in?
I just want to bring up the goalkeepers. There is actually 4 goalkeepers at Celtic. Ross Doohan is the 4th goalkeeper, and his contract's actually up next summer. I actually think he will move on in the summer as well. So our 4th choice goalkeeper will probably move on as well. Looking at the right back situation, you've got John Joe Kenny, only 24 years old, potentially available for £5 million. I think that would be a fantastic buy if it was something that Celtic could afford and could bring in as part of this rebuild. I think his performances since he's came in have been very impressive. They remind you a lot more of a Mikael Lustig type right back as opposed to a Jeremy Frimpong. And he can certainly get up and down that line very well. Anthony Ralston, 22 years old at the end of this season, and he only have 12 months left on his deal. I think for me, that's probably the time that Celtic part with Anthony Ralston. He's had umpteen loan deals before. I think he was actually scheduled to go out on loan this season if we were able to bring another right back in, but that fell through. He's very highly rated at both Dundee United and St Johnstone, and I think that's probably his level. I think he'll move on. He'll probably be released on a free. If not, it'll be a small deal, and he'll go to probably another Premiership side. Ayer, as you say, I don't want him to be the right back if he's going to stay, and we'll probably go on and discuss whether he will stay later on. But that, for me, on my kind of shopping list, as you mentioned, I've got 2 right backs in there. I think it's a position we really do need to strengthen in the summer.
So you're actually going out and getting 2 right backs. I mean, I would maybe, I don't disagree with that. I'd maybe think, you've got Leo Connor coming back from his loan. He was always a project signing. I remember speaking to someone at Celtic when we brought in O'Connor and the aforementioned Jeremy Frimpong, Colin. At that stage, he wasn't sure which one would break into the Celtic team. They were on a level. That was the discussion at that time. Obviously, the person who broke in was Frimpong. Lennon was a massive fan of Frimpong, gave him a lot of games, and obviously he progressed and moved on. Do you think O'Connor would be classed as a backup to, for example, you mentioned Kenny there. I mean, I think he's been steady. I don't think he would be a fantastic signing, Colin, and at that price, I'm not sure we'd be investing that kind of money in a right back at this stage.
I mean, £5 million is what... It's almost the going rate nowadays. when you look at the kind of quality of that player. I mean, Kenny, obviously an international with Ireland. I know we'll go into the international debate when we get to the likes of Shane Duffy at centre-half position and what you get for that kind of money. But no, I honestly think at 24...
Apparently, according to Roy Keane, Colin, if you can trap a ball, you play for your country.
Well, I mean, they've got Matt Docherty at right back at the minute there, and he gave him a slagging, so we know what Roy Keane thinks of them. But no, I think Kenny would be a good player for us, and I think it's a good investment. Would you get more back off that going forward? Not 100% sure, but he'd maybe be someone that you get 5-6 seasons out of, and I think at £5 million, that's an investment worth making. Looking at Leo Connor, now obviously he's been at Tranmere. There was an interesting analysis of Leo Connor. Leo Connor's been moved into central midfield for Tranmere this season, and he's also played centre-half. He's been out of his traditional sort of right-back position, and he is a very versatile player. He is someone that can play almost in every position across that back line. But he seems to have moved into this sort of central midfield position with Tranmere. Now, when you've got a lone player that's changing position, you ask, is that the parent club, as in Celtic, that have asked Tranmere to take a look into this? Or is this something that Tranmere's done off their back? Because if you're wanting to get Leo Connor to come back in and be available for Celtic next season, you'll have an idea of where you want him to play. And if you want him to play right back and Tranmere's playing him centre mid, and it's a deliberate move to move him into centre mid, is that something you want because you own that player, you're loaning him out? I don't know. Maybe that's something that's going on behind the scenes with Celtic and Tranmere to suggest he won't be playing right back next season.
Well, I can tell you if they reckon he's going to get a game in the Celtic side in midfield, when we get to the midfielders and the wealthy talent in there, I mean, he's going to be struggling. Let's be honest, Colin. There's far more chance of him getting a shout at right back when you look at the dearth of talent we've got there. We've got John Joe Kenny in temporarily. We've got Tony Ralston and, of course, Leo Connor himself. So if he wants to have a future at Celtic, any Kenny future, it would probably be as a right back, I would suggest.
Yeah, and taking a look at it across the whole right backs, I can see Ralston moving on. O'Connor will definitely come back in the summer, and I think he'll definitely get the pre-season to show what he can do. Kenny will probably go back to Everton, and then it might be a long summer saga as to whether we'll see him back in the hoops next season.
Yeah, it was interesting. You were saying you see him more as a Lustig than a Frimpong. I would agree to a degree on that one, because Frimpong was all about taking men on, wasn't he? I mean that was his game. Although I was quite impressed for one half against Dundee United with regards to John Joe Kenny's offensive play. I thought he was getting a lot of joy down the right hand side, but unfortunately that seemed to have dried up in the second half, Colin. But I just think at that price and on his wages, it might not be where we're going to be investing. But again, sometimes it's better to go with the player that has experience of the club. It wouldn't surprise me, Colin, if we tried to get him back in on loan for an entire season. That wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, I'd be happy with that as well.
That we move on to the left back situation, and we've spoken again about how difficult we've found it to bring in a replacement or anyone to wear the jersey since Kieran Tierney left. We've brought in Diego Laxalt, Wally Bolingoli and Greg Taylor, all currently at the club, although Bolingoli I doubt would be recalled for action. If he's ever recalled, it'll just be for training until we get another loan deal or a permanent transfer, I would suggest.
Yeah, and I think he's also out injured at the moment. Did he not have a serious leg injury whilst playing for Istanbul? So I'm not even sure he'll play any more games this season at all.
I know. I remember, was it on his Instagram? I think he had a wee picture of himself in the hospital bed, and the Celtic fans were really, sympathetic towards him. But I don't think he has a future at Celtic. Greg Taylor, at this moment in time, obviously he's injured. He had got that. I'm going to call it a number 3 jersey. It never is a number 3 jersey. It's a number 3 shorts. He had got that position and he got a run of games there that he needed, Colin. And he was the first choice left back, and then disaster strikes and he's injured. Have you been impressed with Laxalt since he come back in?
Not overly, if I'm honest. I liked the balance that was given from having Taylor on the left and Kenny on the right. I thought they were very similar players. When you take a look at what Celtic's biggest deficiencies have been this season, it's definitely been at the back. And when you look at likes of maybe Frimpong and Laxalt, they were more offensive-minded players, whereas Taylor and Kenny offered you that sort of solidity in defence. And having that balance on both sides was very good. I think Greg Taylor's a very consistent performer, and as you say, I think at times he was almost making himself one of the first names on the team sheet with his performances this season. Diego Laxalt was. He kind of came in and was almost like a breath of fresh air. We were always screaming out that we needed a left back and we needed someone that could actually create things going forward. And in his first couple of games, he was outstanding. But then it was almost as if he reduced to the level of everyone else that he was playing with. So was it just that the rest of the team was actually making him look good, or was he actually really playing well at the start of the season? And I'm sure everyone will have their own opinion on that. I just don't think for the money that you're going to have to pay for someone like Laxalt, it's something that Celtic will look to spend. I'm sure there's other options out there for the club, but I think Laxalt, I mean, he's kind of flattered to deceive for most of his time on loan here at Celtic.
Yeah, already from the goalkeepers to the right back to the left back, we're looking at potentially up to 5 new signings, Colin. It's 3 to 5 new signings already, and that's just the first 3 positions. We're going to move into the centre halves. Let's have a run through of who we currently have at the club. Chris Jullien, Shane Duffy, Nir Beaton. As I said before, I regard them as a centre half these days. Chris Ayer, Stephen Welsh, and a player who we have out on loan, who has been discussed quite a few times on ACSOM, Jack Hendry. So from the 6 that we've got there, I would put my mortgage on Shane Duffy going back to Brighton for a kick-off. It's simply not worked for him. We've spoken at length around what's happened since he's came to the club. Nir Beaton. Now, I know that you previously were a massive fan of Nir Beaton, Colin. Like his countryman Ilhamid, is Nir Beaton's Celtic career over?
I would say so, yeah. I think he will probably make the move at the end of the in the summer, at the end of the season. Again, though, maybe having a new manager in, he'll maybe want someone that's had the experience of being at the club to help him out. He might not move right away, but I think over the first season of the new manager's reign, I can see someone like Nir Beaton moving on. Someone that wasn't on your list that I think might come into contention as a youth player for next season is Leo Helge. Probably pronounced that terribly. Who's on loan at Ross County at the minute, getting some first team football. Yogi took him up there. Only 19. Signed as a 16-year-old from Rosenborg, and still has another 12 months left on his deal, at least when he comes back. I think there's an option for Celtic to get another 12 months out of that. Someone that's playing regular football in the Scottish Premiership, if you can bring him back into the Celtic fold, that's exactly what we're crying out for these players. You wanted guys like Stephen Welsh, who was on loan at Morton, to actually play in the league above, so that when you have to bring them in to play the likes of a St Mirren, a Hamilton, a Ross County, it's something that they're not it's something they've got experience about. It's not a big jump for them. So we should be loaning players out to teams like Ross County. And I'm excited to see what Helge can do going forward. 17
years of age, Norwegian. Obviously, the big question mark will be around our fellow Norwegian and Chris Ayer. Unfortunately, he's the one player out of those noted that may be on their way, Colin, that I would love to keep. And I actually think looking through the squad in this way, it actually shows you that we need to. I mean, Chris Jullien, for example, he's out until October, right? So he's injured till October. Duffy's going to leave. We reckon Nir Beaton's time will come to an end. Chris Ayer is reportedly on his way this summer, which would leave us with Stephen Welsh. And as I said, you've thrown in a 17-year-old who's getting some game time under John Hughes. Yep. The only other player we've got is Jack Welsh, Jack Hendry. Who's Jack Welsh? Who knows? Jack Hendry, possibly, who has obviously gone over to Belgium. And he's found a bit of form. They're talking about a £2 million release clause. I don't think we're in a situation at the moment to turn our nose up. And now, again, there's going to be fans screaming at this suggestion that we bring back Jack Hendry. But at this moment in time, we've only got Chris Jullien, Chris Ayer, Stephen Welsh and Jack Hendry to call upon. Yeah. I mean, I'm not discarding Hjeld. I think that what happens with players like that, though, Colin, is maybe for another season or so, a loan deal, a long-term loan deal would benefit a player like him, and then bring him back to the fold, maybe with all that experience, 30, 40 games under his belt. Let's have a look then. What do you think centre-half-wise? We're going to lose Chris Ayer, aren't we? There's a question mark around Nir Beaton. How many centre-halves do we bring in? Because at the moment, it's looking like we need 2 at least.
I think if Ayer does go, you need 3. and if he stays, you need two. I've always said you need 4 centre halves, and I said this at the start of this season. I said it in the January transfer window, and I'll keep saying it until we actually get it. We need 4 centre halves at the club. Stephen Welsh, I'm happy enough to be in as the sort of fourth choice centre back.
Fourth choice, is that not a bit harsh?
Well, you're looking to sign probably a better standard of player. What I've seen from Welsh is there's a lot of mistakes in him. He does win quite a lot in the air, and I know that Celtic fans have really taken to him this season. But I mean, there was times against Aberdeen where you see the ball kind of running through his legs, and you see him kind of getting out-muscled by strikers. And do you know what? He's going to develop that more as he gets more game time at Celtic. But at the minute for next season, I wouldn't want him going in as maybe second or third choice centre half. I want him to come in the same way that you throw Near Beaton in at centre half now. I want him to be there that if someone picks up an injury, then you can call on Welsh. I don't want him to be like he's pushing for a start. He'll get there, but I still think he's got a lot of development to do in that sense. As we just mentioned, Julian's going to be out until October, could be even longer. We don't really know what's happening there. Ayer, someone I'd love to keep at the club. He only has 12 months left on his deal after this summer, so I think Celtic will probably look to cash in on him in the summer. If you could get him to sign a new contract, that would be an amazing bit of business this summer. It would almost be, as they say, one of the famous cliches, like a new signing. I've seen that put a smile on your face there, Paul. But yeah, Welsh is probably the only one. Jack Henry, again, I think he'll probably move on. I know his team that he's at, is it Ostend? Probably pronounced that wrong. They've got an option to buy him for 1.75 million, I believe it is, in the summer. He's done really well over there. He's made the team of the week several times. Really impressive. Been linked with moves down south as well. If that Belgian side's got anything about them, if those bids are real, they'll sign him for 1.75 and sell him on for whatever the bids come in from for England.
Jack and Bauer, I think renamed him because the scouting reports coming in at Celtic were that he was playing like Beckenbauer. Right, so if you lose Henry, potentially Ayer, Near Beaton coming to that stage of his career, and Duffy, that leaves us with Chris Jullien and Stephen Welsh. So you reckon we bring in another 2 if Ayer stays, or 3 if he goes? It just shows you the extent of this rebuild, Colin. It really does.
Absolutely massive, yeah.
I'm at the stage now of I'm trying to, before we get to the centre mids, let's have a look at what we've got on the right hand side. We've got Jamesy Forrest. It was great to see him back. I know that it's going to take a while for him to regain the fitness and the sharpness. Of course it is. We've got Marianne Sved out on loan at Mechelen. Didn't start off that well, but he seems to have found a bit of form. And as you've already pointed out before, Mikey Johnson can play on the right. You know, we do see him as a kind of left-sided player, but he can also play on the right, and he's been deployed in the right, even as far back as Brendan Rodgers' time. So we do have that. And then I'm going to throw in a name here because, you know, I have seen him playing, but even looking at his Bolton kind of career, it's a bit ambiguous regarding his specific position. Luca Connell. I mean, is he a midfielder? Is he a right-sided midfielder? Where exactly does Luca Connell play?
Luca Connell plays central midfield, defensive central midfield, potentially has played left back for Bolton before. I wouldn't see him on the right hand side anywhere. So you're really left with the kind of 3 options there of Forrest, Sved and Johnston. Probably another name that you could throw in that could play out there as well is Ryan Christie too. But then will he still be here when we start next season? Do you
even put in the list Dembele? Because no, I think we're all resigned to the fact that he's going to be going. Yeah,
he's gone. I mean, when I looked at the youth players, Karamoko's gone. Armstrong will go flex. His contract's up in the summer. He'll be going as well. The only one that I would be interested seeing coming back that we've maybe not quite seen round about the squad yet that potentially could have a future is Barry Coffey. He's out on loan at Cliftonville at the minute. I'd be interested to see what he could do in the summer.
So right-sided players, Colin, we were kind of calling out for backup this season. Do you still think we need to bring in a right-sided player?
Yeah, definitely.
So another one. And on the left, again, it's not as though we have a wealth of talent on the left-hand side. At the moment, you're looking at Mikey Johnson. We've seen other players deployed out there, like El Yunusi, who's only in on loan. I mean, who else? Who else can play wide left for us?
That was a struggle when I was looking at it as well. Again, Christie's someone that's played on both of those sides. We'll take a look at him. Probably most people see him as a central kind of attacking midfielder. I've seen suggestions of trying to play Turnbull out there. I think that you take away his creativity if you do that. Callum McGregor's done it before. But yeah, you're very limited out there. And if you take Elyounoussi away as well, then who do you have there? I think that's a position you probably need to bring at least one, if not two players in there, a permanent and potentially a loan deal to back that up.
Yeah, and I don't think we're going to get another loan deal on Elyounoussi. So would you, we've already spoken about John Joe Kenny, there's a player you're familiar with. We're far more familiar with Elyounoussi. Would you make the deal permanent, or is it time for a change there? I mean, he's inconsistent. He's not scored for, I think, he scored plenty of goals, but he's not scored for ages. He scored one goal since, last year. And he is inconsistent. And we've seen the best and the worst of Elyounoussi. And I don't know if I would be investing £5 million and bringing him in permanently.
I think if the money's right, it's definitely an investment Celtic should look to make with Elyounoussi. Even just watching that game against Dundee United the other day, you've seen the work rate he was putting in there. He was really, really trying. It was just one of those days where Celtic could still be playing right now and not have scored. The amount of chances we had, and Seagrass was doing well in goal. A lot of the shots were straight at him, but you've seen even what can happen to a Celtic goalkeeper this season when a shot's straight at him. Of the 4 loan deals, I think Elyounoussi one that we could potentially see next season. I don't think he's got a career at Southampton. I also think Southampton do have the potential to go down from the English Premier League this season. If that's the case, they'll probably have to clear out a lot of the players in there, and Elyounoussi could come at a price that's maybe more affordable to Celtic's budget.
Good point. Excellent point. Well made. What do you think of the rumours of another English club? Just while we're here, actually, Sheffield United parting ways with their manager instantly. He is the favourite to come to Celtic. It just shows you how fickle these things are, isn't it?
Well, the thing that surprises me about the Chris Wilder thing is when we've mentioned the name Eddie Howe, a lot of people say, he's got no European experience, he's won nothing. And then suddenly Chris Wilder becomes available and there's so many people throwing his name into the hat. It just seems to be the case when any manager loses their job at the minute. Knowing that the Celtic job's available, it's like, we'll link him with a Celtic job. I don't think he's probably the kind of manager we're looking to bring in this summer. He's also the same manager that thought it was good money to spend £20 million on Ollie McBurney and almost the same on Ollie Burke. So if that's his transfer record, I think I'd rather keep him away from Celtic. But rumours, if you believe them, that Neil Lennon will be the new Sheffield United manager. I don't know why, but I think Sheffield United have got the wrong side of the deal if that's the case.
I was interested, surprised that Neil Lennon was linked to that particular job. I mean, going back to Ollie Burke, I'm delighted you brought him up. Born in Kirkcaldy, fellow Fifer. I threw out the question. I wasn't making it as a statement. I asked the question, in terms of accumulated transfer fees, isn't Ollie Burke the most expensive footballer in the history of football?
Probably in the history of Scottish football. That's
what I mean. Scottish football, obviously. Doesn't it? the most expensive Scottish footballer in history. Tell me someone who's had an accumulative transfer fee that beats Ollie Burke. That's how interesting that is, that people would spend £15 million several times on the player. But yeah, I agree with you. No, I'm not interested in Chris Wilder coming to Celtic. It takes us to centre midfield. We've got loads and loads of central midfielders. You've now thrown Luke O'Connell in there as well for me. But Scott Brown, obviously there are rumours flying, quite strong rumours in relation to Brown teaming up with Stephen Glass at Aberdeen in a player stroke assistant manager role. We've got Ismail Assoro, who obviously came in and was very effective this season. I think he is the future in that position. Davy Turnbull, for me again, big, massive, bright spot this season. Ryan Christie, I know that you have a love-hate relationship with Ryan Christie. I'm a big fan of Christie, but I do think he will move on this summer. Tom Rogic, another player who I think is on his way out this summer. I would suggest that, tell me if I'm wrong. Callum McGregor, you've also got players like Ewan Henderson, Scott Robertson, who's out on loan again. Olivia Ncham, who's out on loan, and there's no guarantee that's going to turn into a permanent deal, Colin. Wow. The only other name I've seen actually on the squad lists was Manny Pires, but I think that's probably going to go the same way as Andrew Gutman in terms of...
he's gone.
He's on his way.
Gone. He's gone.
As is the youngster Cameron Harper that played against Hibs that night. He's gone. New York Red Bulls. So we've got loads of midfield players, but let's have a look at who's going to stay and who's going to go. First of all, Scott Brown.
I think he'll go.
You think? You think Aberdeen?
I think if that opportunity comes up, and I know Stephen Glass is very highly rated. I actually work alongside someone who's a big Atlanta United fan, and when he was
in Greenock.
No.
Is he part of the Greenock Supporters Club?
No, it's a global role here, Paul. It's a bit of global work. But no, when Stephen Glass was taking over, I'm trying to remember who it was. It was one of the De Boers, I believe, he took over from at Atlanta United, and he managed to guide them into a fairly decent position, considering the shambles that they were left in. Now, if Stephen Glass takes over at Aberdeen, we know there's a connection there between Aberdeen and Atlanta United. I believe there's one of the biggest investors in Aberdeen actually is also an investor in Atlanta United. They're partner clubs. And one of Aberdeen's biggest signings over the last few years, Ronald Hernandez, is actually out on loan there at the minute, a Venezuelan international. That's one of those answers you're going to get at a quiz in the next 10 years, one of the last Venezuelan internationals to play in Scottish football. So remember and write that down. But no, if that opportunity comes up, it's a chance for Scott Brown to extend his playing career, maybe playing more regularly at Aberdeen than what he would be at Celtic next season. I know he's looking at his coaching badges. He was involved in the reserve team a couple of years ago. Yeah. I think it's a good opportunity for him. And if it does come up, I could see him moving on. If he stays at Celtic, I think it will be in a sort of Tom Boyd, Paul Lambert kind of role where he's the captain, but he's not the playing captain. He's the captain of the squad behind the scenes. And you turn to him for maybe cup games or for kind of, if you're playing 2 games in a week and one of them's against like a St Mirren or a Hamilton, then you turn to a Scott Brown.
I've got concerns about letting Scott Brown go, I've got to say. And I think it's when we're going through the squad call and the amount of players that are going to be leaving, I think there are real kind of cornerstones of this team that you need to keep. I wouldn't expect him to start 30, 40 games next season. He's probably going to start 15 to 20 games. But as you say, that influence on the training park, that influence in the dressing room, I think that's vital for a club like Celtic. Certainly for a club that is in transition. You need to have the players, you know?
Well, when you take a look at it, Scott Brown will be 36 at the start of next season. If you keep the squad exactly as it is right now, then the only other players that will be in their 30s is Lee Griffiths. Scott Bain will be 29. So it just shows that we do have quite a young squad there. Yeah. And having that experienced figure wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing behind the scenes. But I think if Brown wants to maybe play on till he's 37, 38, and he sees the opportunity to get into the coaching side of things, that opportunity at Aberdeen would be one that I think he'd seriously consider. And it's mental to think that only a couple of years ago, we were saying that Scott Brown could be playing out the rest of his career in Australia. Just wonder where that would have ended up.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ollie Encham obviously has been, I'm not going to say found out, but there've obviously been French reports suggesting that Marseille will not make that move permanent, even though they have the option to. He'll be back at Celtic, but I still think we'll find a move for Encham. Yeah. Christie obviously wants to. I say obviously. It's suggested that Christie wants to go. I don't think we're going to see the Tom Rodgick of old calling on a consistent basis, and if we can get a good enough offer for Tom Rodgick, he'll be gone. As you say, Manny Pires, players like that kind of project signing, we're beyond that at the moment. Ewan Henderson, Scott Robertson, what's your thoughts on that? Will they benefit from further loan deals next season?
Well, if you take a look at it, Henderson's only got 12 months left on his deal come the summer. He's only 21 years old, but I think he is someone that will probably move on. I think they'll take a look at the career that his brother Liam's had and say that he can maybe do something similar. I think he'll be one that if he isn't going to be guaranteed playing time next season, he'll definitely move on. Scott Robertson he's had a great loan spell down at Doncaster for the second half of this season. I think he'll be one that's very highly rated amongst the coaches at Celtic and one that will be given the chance to show what he can do in the summer. The only other one that maybe comes up into that consideration is Kerr McInroy. Now, his contract's actually up this summer, and he's been playing very well for Dunfermline. Yeah. I don't know if it's maybe worth giving him another 12 months just to see what he could maybe break into the side under a new manager. But if not, he's going to be a great pickup for maybe a Premiership side this summer.
My Dunfermline compatriots through in Fife are raving about McInroy, absolutely raving about him. So if you're looking at players maybe like McInroy and Robertson staying, they're going to be backup players. They're potentially going to be loaned out again if we do keep players like that. Roderick's on his way, Christie potentially on his way. In your eyes, that would leave us with Ismail Assoro, David Turnbull, and Callum McGregor, plus a couple of young guys, because you're thinking Brown might be on his way. So how many central midfielders then do we need to strengthen the squad with, Colin?
Well, taking a look at it, I reckon we'll still have Sorrow, Connell, McGregor, Turnbull, and Robertson, potentially even McInroy. I think if you look at it, it'll depend on the formation that we look to play next season. If you're going with a 3-5-2, I think you probably need one, maybe two additional centre midfielders. If you're going for the 4-2-3-1, I think you're almost set up for that position. I'd be looking for a number 10 in that case. Someone I'd love to see us pick up, and I believe he's actually available right now to sign a pre-contract, is Alan Campbell at Motherwell. I think the guy's got a really big future ahead of him. He's obviously played alongside Turnbull before. And I think he could be the next Scott Brown in that position. He plays the sort of box-to-box the way that Brown did in his younger years. And I think as he develops, he'll drop deeper and deeper into the pitch, and he offers a lot. If you had the choice between him and Ferguson, for me, it would be Alan Campbell.
Would it? Interesting. Yeah. One player I disagree with you on is Luke O'Connell, Colin. I think that if he was ever going to get a sniff at this Celtic side, it would have happened post-Dubai, when we were down to the bare bones of the team, and he didn't. I mean, the biggest surprise for me was Cameron Harper. You know, he came in from absolutely nowhere, played a game. If Connell was anywhere near first team level, he'd have got a game against Hibs or against Livingston for one or both of those two games. I don't think he's going to be at the club next season.
Well, he only turns, I think he's 20 when the season starts next year. His contract runs till 2023. And I think the unfortunate thing for Luke O'Connell was the players that were available to play centre midfield in those games. He was on the bench. He was an option there. But you still had McGregor, you still had Turnbull. There were still players that could play in those positions. And he was just unfortunate. I mean, if he was a striker, he would have been guaranteed the game, the way that it ended up against Hibs and against Livingston. So he just seems to have this kind of rotten bit of luck, but he is only 20. He's still younger than Henderson. He's still younger than Sorrow. I think there's still probably a future there. I think he gets a fresh chance with a new manager coming in. And if the coaches, I mean, every coach that you've heard speak about him has ranted and raved about him, so there has to be a player there.
We shall see. Strikers. Now, at the moment, we have Edouard. I'm just taking it as read that Edouard will be on his way from Celtic. I mean, I'm not taking it for granted as such, but I would be massively surprised if Edouard was in a Celtic jersey next season. We've got Lee Griffiths, Ayeti, Klamala, and we've also got Bayo. I'll give you my take on the striker situation. We lose Edouard. I think it's time for Edouard to go, and hopefully we're able to get the right money for him. Then I put Klamala and Bayo in the same kind of category, even though Bayo's out on loan at the moment. I think we've seen enough from both of these players to suggest that they're not the answer for Celtic going forward, Colin. So probably it might be difficult to get them out permanently. So I would expect both of those players to go out on loan next season, and that leaves us with Griffiths and Ayeti. I've seen a lot of comments on the Griffiths situation saying that his Celtic career is over. He's had chance after chance with numerous different managers. I am in a completely different boat there. I think that very much like Scott Brown, there are certain people in that squad that I would not allow to leave Celtic, and it's due to the fact that you need to have that transition period whereby there's a familiarity in the squad. So I think Griffiths, Forrest, McGregor and Brown gives you that. I think they're the players that give you that. I reckon that we go into next season with Ayeti and Griffiths, and we would be looking to buy one, possibly another two strikers.
So taking a look at the attacking options, obviously Edouard, Ayeti, Klamala, Griffiths and Bayo. There's also guys like coming through the reserves like Jonathan Afalabi, who's out on loan at Dundee at the minute, but I don't think he's done anything to suggest that he'll be able to make that step up into the first team. So that kind of leaves you the five strikers. Edouard, I agree with you. I think he'll be moving on in the summer, and I think Celtic will use this opportunity to get whatever they can for him, because I don't think he'll sign a new deal. Klamala, I could see leaving on loan. But if he does go on loan, I want him to stay in Scotland. I want him to go to a Hibs or an Aberdeen or something like that, because I think that'll tell you whether he is good enough to play Scottish football, whether he can come back and give Celtic something. And Griffiths, I'm really on the fence about Lee Griffiths. I don't know whether he's had too many opportunities at Celtic, whether he needs a fresh start somewhere else, whether he'll get that under a new manager, or as you say, whether it's worth keeping him in, like we did when Strachan took over from Martin O'Neill and he kept John Hartson on for a season, just to kind of break through that transition. Can you rely on Lee Griffiths to give you 30, 35 games a season next year? That'll be the big deciding factor in whether he stays or not.
The thing with Lee Griffiths is, if he gets those games against your domestic opposition, Colin, you and I both know he's going to score goals. He's going to score goals. He's not 33, 34. He's not at that stage of his career. He's probably lost 18 months to 2 seasons of his career in the last 4 or 5 years, which a lot of people think, it could work 2 ways, can't it? It could extend your career, or the rot sets in. You lose that fitness, you never regain the sharpness. So I think next season is going to be massive for Griffiths. He's only got 1 year left in his contract, isn't he?
Yeah, he's only got 12 months,
So I'm looking at that situation. We've gone over and over the managerial situation, and I'm sure we'll speak about it again, Colin, on a Celtic State of Mind. Between the two of us, we are looking at 10 to 14 players coming in across the squad.
Yeah, I've got 13 in. I've got at least 1 goalkeeper, 2 or 3 centre-halves, a left-back, 2 right-backs, a right mid, a centre-mid, 2 left mids and 2 forwards.
That's some shopping list. That's some shopping list.
13 players.
And you're looking at players who, and I'm going to say players who we could command a fee for, right? So obviously I'm including players like Jack Hendry in this. We've got about 7 players. So Jack Hendry, Edouard and Cham, Christie, Ayer, Barkas, should he go, Tom Rogic. So these are players that you might get anything between a couple of million quid in Jack Hendry's case up to maybe the big signings of Edouard and Ayer. I'm not going to put figures on it because the way that the financial landscape looks in world football at the moment, Colin, there's going to be some surprises in that respect. We already have the £11.5 million, albeit we don't have the full £11.5 million. It's a lot less than that for Frimpong. This is a huge... The level of rebuild is incredible this summer for Celtic, and I think that and it feeds into the fact that we really need to act quickly on getting the manager in place now, Colin.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, you've got this kind of break. I know there's some international games and there's some Scottish Cup games, but I think it's almost 3 to 4 weeks between the game against Rangers next week and the next game, the first game after the split. This is the ideal time. Go out there, identify, if you've not already done so, who you want in, negotiate that contract, and if they're not going to be here between now and the rest of the season, if they're only going to be watching from afar, at least they can start to make their plans on who they want to bring in. If they want to give Kennedy the last 5 games, but know that they're coming in and know that they can start making moves on transfers, I'm okay with that. If they also want to come in and coach the last 5 games of the season to see what they can get out of the players that's already there, that's okay with me as well. But I'd rather we've done it now instead of waiting until the summer and then this goes on and on and on. Get the man in and get him in now.
Well, Colin, it's going to be an interesting few months in the world of a Celtic State of Mind. We will cover every single move, every step of the way. That's why there was an extra bulletin today on a Saturday afternoon, even though there's no games getting played this weekend. From Celtic's perspective. Thanks everybody for getting involved. Today is a shorter bulletin, therefore we can't go through some of your thoughts on things like Colin's insistence that Connell's going to be part of the team next season and whether or not you agree with that. But he has admitted that it's time for Near Beaton to go. So thanks for joining us on YouTube, Facebook and on Twitter. If you are watching on YouTube, get involved by subscribing to the page. We're putting out content every single day, be that Celtic content and some other subjects, because we're covering true crime, we're covering music and various other subjects as well, maybe a wee bit of politics thrown in, and aspects of football culture as well. Colin, I will see you again on Wednesday, Colin, because you'll be back for the Football Insomniac. Remind me on St Patrick's Day who your guest is.
So my guest on Wednesday is Irish journalist Rachel Lynch, someone who, if you've been following Celtic on Twitter, you'll have seen her name pop up several times before. I'm delighted to have her on the show, joining me on St Patrick's Day for a bit of an Irish theme.
I look forward to that, Colin. And all that's left for me to say is, Colin Watt, thank you again for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind, sir.
Take care, guys.